The intense international manhunt underway. German authorities are searching for the suspect in the Christmas market attack in Berlin, while President-elect Donald Trump uses the tragedy to argue for a Muslim registry. Watch.
You know my plans all along, and I've been proven to be right, 100% correct. What's happening is disgraceful. It's an attack on humanity, and it's got to be stopped.
I want to bring in Ambassador John Bolton on this, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and a Fox News contributor. Ambassador Bolton, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Does this attack bolster the support for a Muslim registry in the United States? What's your take on this idea?
Well, I think what Trump said during the campaign was that he wanted to focus particularly on applications for asylum from people coming with countries with high terrorist activity, which strikes me as perfectly sensible. If somebody says they're coming from Syria, you're entitled to vet them more extensively than somebody coming from Iceland. I just think that's realistic. I think this tragedy in Germany actually underlines a range of ways that in Europe, particularly, their ability to control this flood of asylum seekers has completely broken down. And I think there are lessons here for us that go beyond just how you screen people to let them in and who you let in the first place.
Steve Hilton?
Ambassador, do you think that there's any leverage that the new administration could deploy with European governments to get them to act more decisively on this? Because my experience is that when I was working with David Cameron in the UK, I think he had a very strong and tough position, but was constantly frustrated by the lack of resolve in the rest of Europe, and particularly as we saw with Germany opening its doors to refugees. What can Trump do to put pressure on them to handle this better?
Well, I think this is a clear example, one of many, sadly, where little American leadership could go a long way. I mean, the European governments over and over again act like they're completely defenseless. Let's take the example of the individual accused of this attack in Berlin. He apparently says he's Tunisian. God knows whether he is or not. The Germans checked with Tunisia. Tunisia says, not one of ours. So the German authorities let him roam free. The answer is you put him in jail. And he holds the key to the jail cell in his pocket. All he has to do is say honestly what country he's from, and then you deport him to that country. So, look, there are a lot of things that are out of control in Europe, but I don't think they've seen any leadership from the United States on this subject in the past 8 years. And so if there's a change there, I think there'll be a change in Europe.
Ambassador Bolton, this is Kat Timpf. You know, a lot of the issues, particularly here, that have happened are people who have already been here, not people who are refugees and coming over here. There haven't been refugees that have been responsible for things, at least in the United States, yet. I mean, what would Trump want to do about that, and how, you know, taking into account religious freedom, of course, as being important in this country also?
Well, I don't know exactly what his plans are here, but let's be clear. The First Amendment does not protect conspiracy to murder people. You can say
but
it's,
if you talk about, excuse me, if you talk about people registering based on their religion and making their life more difficult.
I'm not talking about registering. I'm not talking about registering based on religion. I'm talking about having the kind of vigorous investigative programs that New York City used to have under its prior mayor, that other state and local governments have, that can be used to protect against efforts to engage in terrorist activities. As I say, you cannot use freedom of religion as a shield to commit terrorist acts any more than you can use freedom of religion as a shield to commit bank robbery.
I don't think anybody would say that's the case, except terrorists.
I think they do. I think they do.
I think the key word here is not just immigration. As you mentioned, it's not all about people coming in. It's also integration. It's about people here in America feeling part of something bigger than just their own religion or their own culture. Now, in Europe, again, that's been handled so badly.
Yeah.
Where you've had this doctrine of multiculturalism that is completely agnostic about people not speaking the language of the country, not buying into the values of the country, and going down their own path.
But there's no way that changes, right, Ambassador? Because they've got open borders. That's what the euro is about.
Well, and that's what part of the argument between Britain and Europe is about in terms of the Brexit negotiations, that they want control of who gets into Britain. And look, it's not just Britain. Elsewhere in Europe, other countries in the long path from Turkey through Greece up the Balkans into Germany, after Chancellor Merkel allowed in this flood of 800,000 refugees, all these people had to go through someplace to get to Germany, and these other countries bore the burden of it. This was a huge decision. Yes. 800,000 people in Germany. Germany has a population of 80 million. That means she let in 1% of the total population as refugees. That would be like the United States admitting 3 million refugees from Syria. That's the impact.
Yeah, well it is stark. And it is significant. And obviously, she's trying to walk it back right now. I want to switch gears to Russia, Ambassador, particularly after yesterday's commentary. The Kremlin said that the U.S. and Russia ties are frozen. They said that they are unsure about President-elect Trump. How soon do you expect a thawing of this relationship under President Trump? And what about that comment that it's frozen? What went on?
Well, this is typical Russian bargaining. The Obama administration came in to press the reset button, and the Russians do, as they've done in every negotiation I've ever seen or been engaged with them. If you make a concession, they put it in their pocket and say, what have you got for me now? So we gave them the suspension of our missile defense program sites in Poland and the Czech Republic. We gave them a strategic weapons treaty that was highly skewed in their favor. We allowed them to intervene in the Middle East without any rebuff. We allowed them to take Crimea and get involved in eastern Ukraine with weak and feckless sanctions. So it's no wonder now they're saying, well, what have you got for me next? And ultimately, the Obama administration couldn't think of anything more to give them. Now, whether that changes depends on how Russia behaves. Foreign policy should be fundamentally determined on the basis of national interest. And so how Russia behaves will dictate how we treat them.
So, Ambassador Bolton, I'm an Obama guy, so I won't debate you on everything. But just one question on, I'm assuming then you're for Russia sanctions, being, re-implemented and being tough on sanctions, where there's a lot of debate under the Trump transition team whether they're for or not for it. So where are you on sanctions?
Well, I think the sanctions that have been implemented so far have been worse than useless because they've convinced the Kremlin that they can get away with violating something we said in 1945 would never happen again, which is the use of military force to change international boundaries in Europe. They're getting away with it, and every indication I see is the Europeans are buckling once again. So it leaves the incoming administration in a very unhelpful position, and it gives Putin every incentive to test in the first 90 or 180 days.
Over the last 8 years. To say they've been useless is a little ridiculous. I mean,
they have.
Well, can I just say changing their behavior?
Wait, go ahead, Ambassador. What are you saying, Ambassador?
I mean,
yeah, the Russian leadership doesn't care about the state of their economy the way American politicians do. And actually, Putin has used the sanctions very effectively to say, see, all of our troubles are caused by the Americans. And so it has increased his popularity. It has increased the strength of his regime inside Russia. Yeah. That's how authoritarian regimes act.
Well, he had to do something, right? When oil was crashing and the economy was crashing, he just decided to insert himself in the Syrian conflict.
Right. Well, the economic difficulties that Russia's having internally, and they are having them, have essentially nothing to do with the sanctions. They have everything to do with the crash in the price of oil.
Right. Right, that's what I meant, because, he's having a major crisis in his country, so he's got to look like the tough guy who saves the country by inserting themselves in Syria.
And he now has an air base in Syria, Russian troops on the ground in the Middle East for the first time in 50 years.
Pretty